We've reconnected after many years. Jin Zhang is a director of engineering at infrastructure at Meta. She's a TEDx speaker. She's honestly an incredible leader that we all look up to. And I would love, Jin, to pass it over to you to introduce yourself to our audience.
Hi, Vicky. Thank you very much for this opportunity. I'm also super glad that we got reconnected after all these years. I remember you were one of the finalists of an IT Excellence Award, and it's amazing to see, women like you continue to not only excel in what you do, but also lead with such an example for many others. So yes, I currently enjoy working with Meta's infrastructure. This is the infrastructure that powers all of Meta's products and applications. Things we're very familiar of Facebook, Instagram, WhatsApp. But also these days, the fun things such as our Llama 3 model, the segment, anything that my kids are very much fond of playing with here. And all of these, of course, has to be supported by a kind of network power server and processing. So for all of that composes of Meta's cloud infrastructure.
Oh, incredible. And the infrastructure is what honestly allows AI to run. We sometimes forget, we get excited about all the applications like the generative AI and talking to Claude or talking to Llama and getting the responses, right? But what we really are forgetting that it requires an incredible amount of power of infrastructure to make all that processing work. So tell us about some of the things that you are implementing at Meta, what you have learned as part of this whole evolution into AI.
Yeah, I think Meta is certainly one of the major investors into our own cloud infrastructure because we know how critical that is for user experience that we're serving, right? Whether you're checking in with your family overseas or many of them now conducting their business through WhatsApp messaging groups. And this is how they run their team meetings. So it's really very crucial for a lot of people. We serve about, after all, 3 billion users here. So in that sense, the cloud infrastructure, almost like our day to day, right? Like our light, like our water supply. People expect us to be reliable. People expect us to be responsive enough to meet your need here. But in that sense, I think what really gives me the contrast, right? If you think about social media interaction, whether it's an instant like on my latest Instagram post of somewhere I travel to, or it's a message checking in with a friend saying happy birthday over WhatsApp. These are super instant. Yet the cloud infrastructure that support all of these interactions behind the scene is very, let's say, long lead time.
Yes.
And this contrast usually gets me fascinated. I'll give you an example, right? We're all familiar about Moore's law, and we would say, hey, for the transformer innovation, we probably see, a significant double amount of output every 18 months. If we get really good, maybe it's, every year. Similarly, if you think about hardware generation, a new GPU type these days, right? It takes about, 18 months to 2 years to come with it. So that means at any given time in Meta's cloud infrastructure, we would have a variety of CPU, GPU, different kind of storage, warm code. And when you manage all of these generations, right, not only you need to make sure they're compatible, they're well behaving, they're doing their job, but you also need to think about, which new model is coming in, let's say the next 6 months, the next 12 months, the next 18 months, and where are they going to go, right? Which data center, which role, what kind of network requirement, what kind of cable switches that would ensure compatibility. So this is really like a massive, massive, Tetris game. You figure out where you can optimize every rack position you have inside our data center so that, whatever you place there would not only be working very well, would not only be most, let's say capital efficient, but even better, you would want this to be sitting in the right place next to, for example, some of the companion services, whether it's the storage or it's the inference or it's the training, they all need to sit in perfect places before they can hum this, music of let's provide a, Facebook live stream experience to our users.
I love how you make such beautiful analogies. All we hear is the beautiful instantaneous reaction to our WhatsApp message, right? But it's all these instruments that make it work.
Yes. And in fact, you would laugh that our instrument doesn't look as, what we think instruments should, right? Like, a real orchestra, you see these very cool looking, just beautiful, beautiful instruments. So if you go to Meta and go search our engineering blog, you will see plenty of pictures of the rows and rows of dark, universal looking
Right.
size of football, American football court kind of rows and rows of computer servers. But to me, as I sometimes visit the data centers and walk through these machines, they're indeed humming, right? Because I can see some of the network chassis there. I know we recently put in one of the most recent technology there to help dispatch and resolve any traffic jam more effectively. And then over on the other side, when I see some storage, I actually gets reminded of some of the storage colleagues I know who's probably working behind the scene, writing code
Right.
and pumping new features into these systems. So yes, in a way, these machines do have a humming sound there as they're
Oh, I
operating
know.
them.
I remember
And I
being at a
totally
data
get that
center.
sense.
That's just incredible. And just the connections, right? How everything's connected, the cables, how it's arranged. And there's some data centers that are a mess, and some are just gorgeous
Oh
works
yeah.
of art where everything is perfectly
Yeah, the
organized and labeled.
cabling work from my colleagues, it's top notch. I look at it and I'm like, I need to take that best practice back to my home office setup.
Yeah, it's never like that in my office, but I'm always amazed at it. Tell us a little more about what excites you about AI, just use cases around AI that you're seeing coming out. I just love to hear your perspective on it.
Yeah, AI is indeed a very exciting space, right? So we're having this conversation, more with my personal view here, and this is not necessarily anything related to Meta's work. But if you just think about how AI has really opened up some new horizon in the world, I would say three areas personally I'm most excited about, and it would be health, it would be education, and then the last one would be, creator access or just, ordinary people access. And I'd love to go through a little bit, right? So if you think about health, human body is the most complex system that we ever know. These days, we still cannot figure out what is going on with our immune system. Why are these T cells acting up? What's happening with our spinal cord? How do the signals move from our brain down to each of the body parts? And how do they give feedback and have that feedback loop? It's scary that
Yeah.
after all of these years, we still do not fully understand ourselves. But at the same time, it is because we are so complex that the calculation previously would have taken years if and therefore making any real time adjustment unfeasible, right? But I definitely see AI has opened up a huge door, right? Even from the genome sequencing cost coming down, the therapeutic study cost of being able to leverage AI. And then you see how the devices or new medicine can come out at a shorter time period, right? Because of how quickly the compute power is able to assist behind the scene, right? In this pure research and new treatment and new device space, I already think it's super exciting. And then the next thing, of course, will be education. I think education I truly believe that is the very cornerstone of our society. Personally, I benefited from education in order to have a fulfilling life, in order to have a very different type of life from where I grew up. But if you think about education these days, right, leveraging I am actually more excited about the possibility that hopefully with AI being able to do a lot of these things that's predictable, programmable, trainable, then it leaves human for all the amazing creativity kind of things, right? And that, by the way, has always been a dream of mine from an education perspective. I always know that standard testing is not the best way to figure out our full potential yet. So how do we leverage, the newer technology and truly spark that joy of learning and get people to go focus on what they're really good at and possibly take that to the next level, right? And just maybe move on with a couple of things that we're not so good at, right?
Yeah.
I think AI offers immense amount of possibility. And I mentioned health, I mentioned education. Personally, my professional goal right now is to pursue to go serve on a for-profit board in these domains. So for that reason, I read a lot about them. I advise companies in the space, and I certainly think there's a lot of opportunities from leveraging AI for our own benefit, for our own improvement here. And then the third thing, which is more related to my day-to-day work, and that is about the creator access, right? So if you think about Llama 3, this is super cool. You no longer have to be a data scientist, a programmer, that you can leverage an open source model, which we just released here last month, right? And say, let's say I am a YouTuber who is absolutely an expert, has a lot of insight related to AI. And that everyone would say, oh, you know what? If I needed some information, I want to know what Vicky thinks, right? So
Yeah.
you, Vicky, can literally Llama 3 model and create an agent of yourself,
Yeah.
right? And this is the AI Wiki, right? So
Yeah.
this is kind of now your own rag that you get to create this agent and have this interact and also as input feed into this agent all the knowledge, the insights, all the videos you've produced, all the articles you've written, right? So if you think about that and how that applies to every field, right? Cooking, fashion, medicine, sports, right? Our world all of a sudden become not only a lot more interesting, but just so many more creators are first-handedly creating their content. I think this level of access, right? The access to be able to create and to be able to become the author role in addition to just being the consumer role is going to be a huge change in how we opened up the dynamic, right? I firmly believe in diversity, especially diversity in tech. Just think about how much that would open up for all the diversity, right, in the world. All of a sudden, you'll have different sorts of topic. Everyone's favorite thing is going to show up. And that's, of course, going to make people like my children have a lot more browsing time because it's just so fun to look at things, right?
Right.
But that's also indeed how we should interact, how we should go self-discover, right? Our favorite thing, our best potential. And then if we put it out there and get to share with someone, I think it brings everyone much more connected. Another use case I think that was pretty interesting recently, Meta AI, by the way, is on our website. We welcome users to go try. And there's a couple of interesting things related to Meta AI, right? One, I came from an enterprise technology and, system background. So I'm always very familiar about customer technical support, right? People calling and requesting help. So what we see there, for Meta AI, just like a lot of the other capabilities out there, right? It makes getting assistance significantly easier, right? It's much more automated, captures all the knowledge from and insights there, after I yelled at my
Yeah.
children. So these are kind of the fun things, right? You get
Yeah.
to ask a little bit and get some feedback. But the other thing, these are the jokes and the fun part, but come to a more serious part, right? AI is definitely more than a chatbot. AI can definitely do a lot more than just back and forth transactions. For example, today, like recently, if I'm using ChatGPT to do a particular piece of research, I would ask a question to say, please summarize for me top 5 belief related to a product needs to be customer purpose driven and customer centric, right? And here would come up with the 5 literature. And then I would say, out of these 5 literatures, can you point out to me which one has the famous quote, from Eric Wright? However, these conversations, they don't always make the mark. So sometimes they do miss the mark. And sometimes I've learned that I need to double check the sources, right? Because it's still not accurate. Like I need to go all the way down to get to the page of the book, see it's printed. That's when I can start quoting it. But what's even better here, right, is some of the work we're doing now is to not only make the AI response, faster, has more knowledge, give more accurate answer, but being able to comprehend a more complex and therefore a longer time span of a task. For example, imagine someday, right?
Yeah.
We're doing something pretty complex there. And I would feed, after about 10 or so back and forth prompt and conversation, the next batch is kind of like a processing time, right? I'd be saying, I'd like you to do this in these four categories. And once you finish them, you need to compare this and this and this and give me, the best in this case, yet excluding A, B, and C, right? So when I give this complex, it could be that this AI assistant will be going off and do its work, and it may take a while, right? And I may
Right.
even ask the AI to say, collect the weather for the next 10 days in order to do whatever. So 10 days later, right, for the AI agent to still remember, right, all that very complex prompt and what we're working on, and still being able to come back with, fast and accurate results here, right? These are really something I'm immensely hopeful for. I
Yes.
think we're just going to get to the point where we can specify some pretty tricky scenarios. It's going to be much more than how kids would try to mess with either Siri or Alexa, right? And they were like, tell me a
Oh,
joke,
yeah.
do this. We're going to go a lot more fun than that and actually get them to do some real work for us.
I agree. I'm actually already using it that way. I have some prompts that I've done from like months ago. And, sometimes it's like a month later and I'm thinking about it. I'm like, there's another way I could really do this. And let me
Mhm.
ask it another question. Having that memory there to come back to and like say, okay, I don't think that was quite right. Let's try this again. Or out of these four options, which one do you like the best? And like, that brainstorming, it's like having a brainstorming assistant, that quality of information, the quality of the creativity that comes from it and collaboration is quite interesting to me.
Totally. Totally.
Well, I really love that. I want to know, you mentioned that you're interested in healthcare and education, and we covered some amazing use cases. Where do you see things going in terms of trends with AI? Tell me a little more about what does the future look like here?
I think the future is going to be something we together figuring out with a sense of being optimistic. I'm definitely on the optimistic side. I think AI and technology together will drive a lot more equity, a lot more, enable a lot more access, voices, strength, personal favorites, right? Showing up in our community. So that's definitely going to be the very key thing. At the same time, I have to say one thing I'm also a little bit worried about is all of these growing need of AI and compute, right? It's going to put an immense amount of pressure related to our power supply, our data center build out, right? It's going to be, this effort of, wow, if we're building data center at this kind of speed, if we're consuming power at this kind of speed, what does that mean to our environment? So I think an important part for cloud infrastructure to think about is also this ESG concept, right?
Yes.
Environmental, sustainable and also with governance. Meta, for example, has a net zero goal, and that some similar approach is being shared by many, many major companies, not just tech, right? Everyone here. I think that's very important. And besides that, right, I also think as each one of us has a role to play to help the situation. For example, one thing in my own, meta team here that we're doing is to think about, always how to get more efficiency out of our stack of code, right? Out of our, like early on, I talked about the tetrics of that, where to place all the racks and where to place all the workloads, right? Which machine should we let the Instagram hum versus which machine should we let the WhatsApp to do its own focus on there? I think all of these, the efficiency that we can gain, however small, right? If you do a small Java platform tuning, it may only be up to 0.1% of improvement. But when that 0.1% of improvement goes through a few millions of servers, it all of a sudden became significant, right? So I'm really not a predictor of future, but one thing I feel very confident about is the technologists who are working in this field day by day, right? We're going to continue to find ways to do what we can that's beneficial to our overall need here, whether it's to reduce waste, reduce carbon, make this as efficient as possible. Or sometimes we need to come up with these creative ways, such as today's chip and processor speed is significantly faster and more energy efficient, right,
Yeah.
than what it used to be. So there's really innovation opportunities all over the place, which is most exciting for me.
Oh, that's so exciting for me too, because I'm a big environmental just believer in the impact. We have to think about how what we do impacts society as a whole, whether from the AI perspective, what does that mean for our children, through privacy, security, just sharing information, to really infrastructure and how do we take care of our environment because we already have global warming and how does that impact? So just looking into that is so, so critical. Um, just wanted to kind of see from your perspective, like, how do you want to, you think a lot about legacy, and I sense you're just such an intelligent and thoughtful person. And that's the thing that kind of comes to my mind as I talk to you. What are the ways that, I want to go back to the children. You mentioned children a couple times, and I have children as well. What are the ways you're encouraging your children, right, to learn or to study or to evolve?
I think, it's amazing that for, those of us who had the opportunity to be a parent, you really had the opportunity to learn and to almost like live all over again, right? So, in that sense, back to what we're talking about here for AI, for technology, one thing I always think it's important is what we anticipated in our mind may not be exactly what we perceive it to be out there. I always believe I want to encourage others, whether it's mentees, younger professional women who's entering the workplace, or my own children, to speak out loud of your perception and go test it out. In fact, I ask myself to do this all the time so that I can be more courageous, right, to take risks. One example early on, Vicky, in your intro, you talked about my TEDx talk. Well, my TEDx talk was about Moore's Law, which sounds pretty boring and dark related to cloud infrastructure. Everyone, in that industry knows about Moore's Law. But the initial motivation was actually because when I went to Grace Hopper conference, I met a lot of women, brilliant, who energetic, who's, about to enter into the workforce. Yet they're having a hard time landing that first role. The first role, by the way, is always the hardest, right? They want to get, because all they're searching for, all the keywords they're looking for is, software engineer, iOS developer, Android developer, right?
Yeah.
So I did the talk with these audience in mind to say tech is definitely more than app development. There's
Yeah.
so many things you can possibly do. For example, yesterday I just had some discussions with a colleague of mine here related to traffic.
Yeah.
Vicky, you work with Akamai, so you know the CDN system really well, right? The
Right.
traffic flows from, your server, from cell phone up to the server, from the server to the different CDN pods. So how do you resolve traffic congestion? This is a fascinating path problem, right? How you travel there.
Fastest
Or,
path. Yeah.
yeah. Or later on, I will be having another discussion with a different member that's coming up here. We're going to talk about reliability of code. And that is super fun. My son, he loves to play the hackers, right? He
Yeah.
wants to go find bugs. He wants to go find the back door. And then he's going to put an amazing, either a refactor, rebuild, or the most resistant duct tape on top of that, whichever way he chose to fix it. So these are the things you may not believe these are tech jobs, but these are absolutely tech jobs. So just a simple thinking from even a job search perspective, right? Go validate your perception. If you're only searching for iOS developer, software engineer, that's too limiting. What if
Yeah.
you put in the word of a production engineer? What if you put in the word of a prompt engineer? By the way, prompt engineer is only happening in the last 12 months, right?
Yes.
You need to kind of have that curiosity. I would say go to LinkedIn, read some of the folks that you're interested in, see what were the job titles that's used there. Then you can Google it a little bit more. And once you figure out that's something you're actually willing to try, right, you can totally do it. So lately I helped a mentee who's a graduate school student, right? Her particular work was in a type of system research. And she came to me and she said, Jin, I don't see any role opening like what I'm interested in Meta, right? So I went different places. I was like, well, here in our AR VR team, we have this audio processing specialist.
Yeah.
And guess what? It sounds very similar to that project you just did, up in UK. So whichever way you do it, right, do know that your forward path may not be exactly perfectly aligned with what you're looking for. But if it's correlating enough, like if there's 85% of overlapping, I have a feel that it's going to be workable and it's going to, through this approach, definitely open up a lot more possibilities. So that's really what I think
That's
is important. And it's not only important for, younger people, it's important for myself. I'm reminding myself of that every day.
It is so true and so powerful, right? There's so many opportunities, but also I'm a big believer in the network and relationships. The fact that we met is such a blessing. I think when you pick a job, it's also important to think about the people you will be surrounded with because we get uplifted by the people that we're around. We learn from the people we're around. And sometimes it's that knowledge that propels us to the next direction. Like I might have never imagined myself in security, but I spent almost 9 years talking about security, selling security to customers and understanding that topic, it was unfamiliar to me. So it doesn't mean that just because I knew software, I couldn't go into security. It actually was there was a lot of intersection, but it was a new area in which I could expand. I personally
Absolutely.
experienced what you just described. I so appreciate your time today. There are many transitions in tech and every one of us is figuring out how do we manage our career the young and the old. This is just an incredible conversation, and I'm grateful for you and your time. Thank you so much, Jen.
Thank you very much. Have a great day.
You too.